When I was growing up, I never found anyone really talking about the gay issue. In fact, every reference that was made about the gay issue in those days was a slur.
I remember thinking that there was something different about me. Something wasn't right. And the other kids in the neighborhood started to pick up on it too. And so they would call me sissy, queer, faggot, homo. And yet I couldn't help what I was attracted to.
There's so much confusion, even in Christianity, about homosexuality is because for so long, no one wanted to address the topic.
There's something that I was missing all those years in my study and in my struggle that I came to discover as I studied Jesus.
I share my testimony today. There's many people that come and identify with the fact that, hey, I'm not gay, but you were certainly talking to me.
In telling my story, I don't want people to think that it's just all doom and gloom and a sad story. There were many good experiences in my life. However, there were things that happened in my early childhood that really derailed me.
When I was born, my dad, I'm sure, had great plans for me, being his only son of 4 children. And when I came along, my dad was so proud that he had a son that he actually named me Junior. So I am Michael James after my dad. It's interesting because even to this day, sometimes I really regret my name.
My natural mother, relatives were around her while she was carrying me to full term. And during that time, relatives would say, "So, Jan, are you gonna have a boy or a girl?" And she said, "Well, there's no way I'm having a boy. I'm only going to have a girl. That's all there is to it." There was no other alternative. She was just plain gonna have a baby girl. And so, May 6th of a certain year, I was born, a baby boy.
When I was born, I came into a challenged family situation. My sister and brother were already 6 and 8 years old. My parents were struggling in their marriage. They really weren't planning on having any more children.
As a little girl, after my mom introduced me to Jesus, I was totally stoked about it. I memorized books of the Bible and could flip through scripture and quote off Bible verses to you when I was like 6. And my mom was totally excited, and she was like, "You're gonna become a missionary, and Jesus is gonna work amazing things through your life, and aren't you excited?" And I was like, "I wanna be a missionary."
I'm sure that my dad had every intention of playing football with me and doing all of these macho things that he liked to do. And everything that my dad liked, I hated. I liked playing with dolls. I had 3 sisters, and my dad would be gone a lot of times, so most of the time I'd be playing with dolls or dressing up in my sister's clothes or my mom's clothes, and I began gender dysphoria at an early age.
As my aunt and uncle adopted me, they began to see that things were taking place in my life. I was, at the age of 3, I was running around the house. I was screaming, "I don't want to be a boy, I want to be a girl." I was playing with scarves and dresses. And I'm sure they began to think, wow, what did we get our hands on here? People didn't talk about same-sex attraction then.
I knew that because I would get punished if I got caught playing dolls, or I would be teased or ridiculed by my dad, mainly if I was playing with my sister's Barbies, that I knew that something wasn't right, and yet I couldn't help what I was attracted to. And I remember thinking that if I was a girl, I could do it better than my sisters.
I went to school, and they started teasing me from the very first day. I just saw it to be amazing to be able to endure the teasing and the harassment that I got. Even some of my teachers, most notably my Bible teacher, would encourage and laugh along with the guys that were teasing and harassing me. One of the most unlikely places that I would think that this would come from. I looked to teachers for shelter, for hope, protection. I remember I would go home and I would go into our bathroom that had a door on either side, and I would lock both doors, and I would look in the mirror and I would punch myself in the face, and I would scream at God and I would yell at him, and I would say, "Why, God, why? Why did you create a boy when I was supposed to be a girl?"
I was only 4 years old, one of 6 children. We lived in the country. My parents had moved to the country. They thought that would be a safe place to raise their children. And my dad was a dairy farmer, and so we lived on this big farm. And it was at that tender age of 4 that I was actually sexually molested by one of the farmhands. And that really confused me.
School was tough, and extended family. We had a rough relationship with extended family. And they got more stressful when my older cousin started molesting and raping me. Then I didn't trust anybody because I felt like I couldn't tell anybody. So we continued to have vacations with them and go places with them, and he even lived at our house for a while, and nobody knew. It was from the time I was 7 till I was 13. And it was every time I saw him, so multiple times a year. And I thought I would get in trouble if I told somebody, because he always said, if you tell anybody about this, you'll break the family up.
There was a girl living down the street. She was the same age as me, 7. She introduced me to sexual experience, so we started experimenting with each other physically, and it became an addiction for me very quickly. One day, for some reason, I ended up confiding in an older kid in the neighborhood, and I told him that we were having sexual encounters with each other. But later, he ended up going and telling my sister, and my sister told my mom. You know, instead of my mom using it as an occasion to kind of sit down and talk to me about the importance of sexual purity, maybe she didn't know how to react to it, but for some reason, her and my sister really used it as an occasion to poke fun at me. I thought, okay, well, obviously this is something that I can't really tell anyone about. I can't talk to anyone about this.
What happened for me is my dad was scary. When he was home, he would be loud, and his discipline was abusive. He was always angry. Because my dad was in the Navy, he'd be gone sometimes 2 to 6 months at a time, and so he either wasn't there for me, or when he was abusive, and I wanted nothing to do with that. If that's my gender, no thank you.
I think every child wants to know that they were planned for, that they were wanted. My mother was distraught, angered, full of grief. She didn't want to hold me.
From the time I was molested, from that day forward, my mind was confused. I had wild imaginations. My thoughts were out of control. And my imaginations and fantasies were towards the same type of person that had molested me, which was a man, because that was my introduction to sexual behavior. I didn't know anything else.
As a small child, my parents had been very good at informing us of what was right and wrong. And so from a very young age, my parents had both told me, if anybody ever touches you inappropriately, you tell us. When it started happening, at first I was so young that I didn't really recognize what was going on. And as I got older, it was more guilt that I hadn't told him when it first happened. It was my fault. And so even after telling somebody, there wasn't really like closure to it. There wasn't any understanding, we're sorry, like what can we do to help you? It was, we failed as parents.
I did know, even as a child, that this was wrong, what had happened. But as a victim, I did not want to reveal what had happened. And I felt dirty. I felt, well, I had been tainted. And I felt very different from that day forward.
No one ever molested me. I was never beaten to a pulp or that kind of thing, but there were many areas of neglect. I was in 7th grade, so I was about 13, and we were running home, and I tripped and fell, and I broke my arm. So when my mom came home that night, I was laying on the sofa, and she said, "Oh, you'll be all right. You know, it's probably not broken, and you know, you'll be okay." And so my mother went out. This night in particular, she had a date, left me on the sofa, and she came back Sunday, and I was still on the sofa. I don't blame my mom. I'm not even angry at her anymore. But I believe that because of her brokenness, there was a limit to what she was able to give me.
At the age of 13, I would read my Bible, and I began to read texts about homosexuality and the descriptions about men with men. And by this time, well, there was hardly a day that I didn't know same-sex attraction, but as it related to the Word of God, I found that this certainly wasn't according to His plan. And I thought, wow, how can that be? I didn't ask to be like this.
I remember this roommate, we would wrestle, and one night this wrestling turned sexual. I didn't know how it had happened that way. I didn't know how it got that far or went that far. And the moment that it was over, like all of this guilt came in and condemnation and this shock that I now was the reality of what all those boys said for all those years, that I was a sissy, a faggot, a homo, gay.
Growing up with these attractions towards men instead of girls, I really didn't know how to deal with them. I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about it. I didn't understand myself, and yet I felt ashamed to share what I was feeling with anyone else.
I thought I was the only person in the world that maybe had these feelings. I think a lot of guys and girls too, my age at that particular time, thought they were the only ones in the world that had these kinds of things going on because we didn't dare talk about them.
I just grew up with that emotional confusion, and it festered, just like a splinter in the thumb. It'll have to come out sooner or later. And eventually that's what happened, but that was many years later. I met a guy who introduced himself to me and then identified me as being gay. And I said to him, "I'm what? What did you say I was?" He said, "Oh, you're gay." And I said, "What is that?" It was at the time when the term gay was actually being developed. And he said, "You like guys, don't you? You're gay, I'm gay. I go to college with other guys who are gay. And the church has done a good job at telling us that homosexual behavior is sinful." And that's the end of the conversation. They have nothing more to say. As I was a very active member in the church growing up, I noticed there was no one talking about the gay issue. And so my first introduction to the gay issue through publication happened to come through a Time magazine when I was sitting in a college library where I was studying theology. And when I saw that magazine and I saw that this was the cover story, I was fascinated by the photograph on the cover of that magazine, because up to that point, I felt totally alone in my mental struggle and in my confusion. I didn't know a living soul who was gay. I can remember my parents, saying something, and other people would also say something about,
well, people like that, and I knew they were talking about someone that was dealing with a homosexual tendency or temptation, but nobody would go further. I'd be all ears, but no one would say anything.
I thought that I was just born bisexual, that I was born gay, that, that attraction had always been there for me. So I thought I thought I couldn't be a Christian, and it pushed me away from God. If I'm a lesbian, I'm just, that's sin, and sin equals death. So why would I join a religion that tells me that I'm just going to die for being who I am?
I finally came out to my parents, and they kicked me out of the house for a week. And then my parents called me and said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Can I come back home? Do I need to find somewhere else to stay?" And they said, "No, please come home." My mom, being very religious, is like crying and begging and bringing Bible verses up, and she's like, "This isn't what Jesus wants for you. Like, you're not gonna be in heaven if this is what you do."
I had to be good. That's what I'd learned all my life. And so I got a girlfriend. I'd be praying, asking God to make me straight, to take this away. I didn't want this. I wanted to be married and have a family and a wife.
Ended up being drafted into the military, and wouldn't you know, again, I was messed with while I was in the military and had no idea how to deal with that as well. But still maintaining my spirituality. I was a Christian, I wanted to be a Christian, and I wanted to be right with God. I thought, if I were just married, it would take care of the whole thing. And yet, this thing only got worse. Marriage worked for a while, and then I realized that I had made a terrible mistake. And this woman who loved me very much, I realized I was going to be a big disappointment to her.
So I prayed and I said, "I don't want to live, Lord. If I have to live like this, I don't want to live." And I prayed and I said, "Lord, if this is the closest we're going to be," I said, "take me now. I just don't want to go through what's coming." But God didn't take my life. And I remember the resentment that came, feeling basically that God must be like my dad, because he calls himself Father and I have a father, and so if he doesn't hear or answer my prayer, then basically he must be like my dad, indifferent, judgmental, arbitrary. Today he cares and tomorrow he doesn't. And so I determined that either I wasn't worthy of his time, or maybe he just didn't care.
After I started getting abused, it turned from being totally stoked about Jesus to, why isn't Jesus here? Why isn't he stopping this? I'm crying in my bed at night because these things are happening, and Jesus, I can't hear him anymore. Like, where did he go? And so I thought in my little mind that I had made Jesus mad. Like, is this a different God than I was acquainted with when I was little? Like, it's not as simple as butterflies anymore. It's terrible things happen. There are terrible people in the world. And it's still a struggle to know why he would let those things happen to, like, little 7-year-old kids.
I thought that I needed to be honest with my wife. And I told her, of course, she was devastated and just broke her heart. And we had these 2 children, very young children. But to her credit, my wife loved me. She was a Christian. She was willing to forgive. She was willing to work through it. And she wanted to stay with me. She wanted to go through counseling and see if we couldn't make this work. But when pastors, and we're talking about church people, Christians, would counsel my wife to just divorce this man and get on with your life, that kind can never change. That really hurt me, and it angered me. Now, I felt that way myself, but to hear it coming from professionals who should have answers, it really embittered me against the church and against God himself.
In the Bible, where it talked about homosexuality being an abomination, and I said, "How dare you say that I'm an abomination when you made me this way? That's not fair. I didn't choose this thing. I didn't want this thing." And as hard as I fought to not be those things, and I prayed and I asked you to change me, you never did. And so this is who I am. Take it or leave it.
And eventually, I just gave up. I finally stopped fighting my inclinations. I stopped praying about it. All those years I prayed the Lord would just take this away. He didn't just take it away. I thought that because I continued having these strong desires and these uncontrollable thoughts, that that's just who I was. And I finally decided to just accept who I was and give up. And I brought my marriage to a devastating end. I fell headlong into the gay life, and then for me there was no turning back. I did not want to be gay. I felt I had no choice. I was just accepting who I was, and I needed to get over it, and so did everyone else, because I had no answers.
What happens to the things that we don't talk about? What about pornography? What about overeating? What about a lot of things that Satan has laid out in front of us? And the thing is that he's got something for every single one of us. When you stop and think about it, as long as he's deceived you with your feelings, you're drawn to it, and then you begin to think that your feelings equal truth. And so I believed my friend. I believed that I was gay and that it didn't match up with God's word. And I was like, oh well, I don't know what to do about that. And so I was done. I was done with Christianity. I was done with God. And I openly embraced the gay community, and they openly embraced me.
One day my father sat me down and he said, Danielle, if there are ways in which you're different from most everyone else, it's okay. And if you can, if it's okay to be an individual, and no matter who you are, I'm still gonna love you. And he didn't come out and say, Danielle, it's okay if you're gay, but we both knew that that's what he was getting at. So I thought, wow, okay, I'm not gonna hold back anymore. Not just sexually, but expressively in all of my life.
My sister moved down from Ohio, and she was living with me, and I remember telling her that I was gay. She had no idea. I was mystified that through all the years of playing with dolls and cross-dressing, that it never occurred to her that I might be gay. And she was profoundly shocked. She was so kind.
As a small child, I was very close to my mother. She was what I thought every mom needed to be. As I started getting older and started kind of closing off to people, not being able to trust them, I just kind of pushed everybody aside, including my mom. Even though I really had no reason to, I just felt like nobody else has been there. Why would she?
I decided to actually give Christianity a chance. I would start reading into it and, reading the Bible and actually going to church when there was someone there that I trusted. I was trying to balance going my own way with also trying to keep God in the picture somehow. But eventually, I started saying, I can't do this. I can't be a Christian. This must be why I'm so depressed, because the Bible tells me to be this person and live this way, but I can't. I try and I fail and I can't, and that's why I'm so depressed. And I wanted to be a good person and make good decisions, but I always made the wrong decisions, and I wasn't a good person. I wasn't a good friend. And so I was entering into this struggle. Who am I? Who am I supposed to be? Who am I inside? So I started really becoming more and more extravagant with my dress and my makeup. If I would walk down the street and a little child would look at me and look scared, I thought, I look good today.
In a way, when I went into the gay life, I felt great relief because I was no longer fighting this thing. And I knew biblically that this life was wrong. I was very well aware of all of the Bible texts. I just gave up.
And so for nearly 40 years, I was immersed in the gay culture. I told my parents and I told everybody else, I'm gay, there's nothing you can do about it, I've come out. I ended up in a very promiscuous life. I know that there are many today out there that don't. There are many people that have maybe fallen in love with one person, and maybe that's been someone that they've been with for 25 or 30 years. From all the relationships that I know about that have been like that, they would sometimes claim to be monogamous, but I was sleeping with their boyfriends.
I would use the gyms as probably the number one spot where I would actually pick up men, in the sauna and in the steam room and such, where I was actually acting out as many as 3 times in a day with different people, and as many times as 3 or 4 times a week. 20 years of that.
Well, this went on for years, and all of a sudden coming, at full speed towards me was killer sex, AIDS. And suddenly, my closest friends began to start dying. And I was only 30 years old when this began, and I remember calling my parents on the phone and saying, "What is going on? Why is this happening to me? You're in your 50s, and you don't have anybody who's died yet. Why is this happening?"
I watched my friends drop like flies. I had sex with men, unprotected sex, and they would be dead 3 months later. I knew that I was tempting fate all the time, and yet I could not stop. My addictive drive just kept me moving more and more and more, and no matter how awful I would feel afterwards, it wasn't enough to stop me.
I'm not sharing this today to say that this is what every gay life is like. I mean, there are so many different ways. Heterosexuals are messed up, gay people are messed up. We're all messed up if we're not looking to the one who can bring about the healing that we need, no matter what our mess up is. I wanted to be loved. That's all that mattered.
I met a great guy. Big arms, big blue eyes. He was a millionaire. He drove a convertible Mercedes, had a big house with a pool. I remember thinking, wow, I hit pay dirt. I've arrived. Anything we wanted. And I remember thinking to myself, is this the best it's gonna be? I remember laying there with my boyfriend on the weekends and having the pool out in front of us and thinking to myself, I've got everything that the world says is valuable, and yet, that it?
I thought that I was experiencing a great level of freedom in doing what I was doing, living the way that I was living, going off and living on my own, making my own choices. And I always had this drive for something more extreme, something more fulfilling, and I never really felt like I reached that place of contentment.
If I'm seeking freedom from God's law, because, of course, it's all those thou shalt nots, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. And by giving up and just going into the world, I was now free from that law. And yet, the Bible says that the law of God is the law of liberty. So if I am free from liberty, what is my real situation?
I had 2 sisters that were praying for me. I don't even know how long. I had a sister that was very religious in Colorado, and I had another sister it was my sister there in Florida, who was working side by side with me in my salon, and she would always invite my lovers and me over to holiday meals. She never kept me from holding my nephew when he was a baby, and I knew without a doubt that she loved me, no doubt in my mind. But they were praying for me.
And I think prayer is a big part of the aspect too. We need to pray for people more than just shaking our finger at them or secretly judging them. And that's what Christ did. He mingled with the people, he addressed their needs, he won their confidence, and then he bid them follow me.
And yet Jesus has been all along trying to say to me from day one is that, Wayne, you matter, you belong, and you are loved. But I couldn't see it, and I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't stop long enough to listen to him. I couldn't hear him because I was drowning myself with my own voice. And so he's like, all right, Wayne, as long as you persist this way, you have the right to do that. But I'm trying to reach you, and guess what? There are other people who care about you, and they're actually praying for you.
As I was spending all of those years in the gay life, blaming God for everything wrong in my life, giving him no credit for anything good. I didn't realize that my parents and my family and some of my former friends were praying for me. The way the Lord answers those prayers many times is that he will let a person fall so low and reach bottom to the point that the only way he can look is up.
It took a long time after things stopping, my cousin abusing me stopping, to come to terms that maybe she was still that mom that she was when I was little, that maybe nothing had changed in her, that just maybe I had changed. Finally one day I just broke down and I was sobbing in my room, and she came in and she just hugged me and she said, "Can I please help you?" And I said, "Can you please pray with me? Like, I need you to help." And she said, "Yeah." And she just wrapped her arms around me and started praying with me. And she said, "Jesus, you know where Anna is and I really don't. But she needs you to help her because I can't." And she just held me and I just cried. And she cried. And I still didn't trust her fully, but I knew if I needed somebody to pray, she still had my back.
I started to desire to learn who and what God is and what was really going on behind the scenes, behind the clouds kind of a thing, you know, what the meaning of life really was. And so I started looking into different religions of the world and reading especially into Wiccanism, because for me, I could relate to women better. So I kind of pictured God as a woman more easily. As I was learning these things and entering into this journey towards spiritual things, my sister could see that something was changing. You know, I started finding common ground with her where I could actually relate to her, because I had this newfound interest in reconnecting to my family. Whenever I had chosen to reject God, in a way I also chose to reject my family in a large way, because my sister and my mother had become Christians.
Here I am, this hotshot hairdresser, and my sister comes up to me, and the Lord had told her, there was this evangelistic series going on, and the Lord said, "Invite your brother." And she goes, "He'll never go, but I'll invite him." And so my sister came up to me and she said, "Hey, there's this evangelistic series going on, dirt floor, folding chairs in a tent. Do you want to go?" And I looked at her, and of course I didn't want to go, but I looked at her and I said, "All right, I'll go."
There was one person especially in particular that I really saw the characteristics of Christ in. We would cross paths and we'd exchange words, and then we'd go our separate ways, and I would just think every time, I don't know what that man has, but I want it too. And eventually I decided that I was going to go to church one weekend because I knew he was speaking, and I wanted to just hear what was working for him. So as he started in on that message, the first thing that he said was, "Today we're going to talk about the crucifixion." And I thought, oh, the crucifixion, why that, anything but that.
The preacher was making a call, an altar call, and as I was sitting in my chair, I knew that I wanted to accept Jesus into my heart that night. But when I was thinking about my boyfriend and how my life was, and I was out of control with a sexual addiction, there's no way I could go up there. There was no way I could change my life. And so just then, as I was sitting in that chair, the preacher said, "For some of you tonight," he said, "you'll never have another opportunity to accept the Holy Spirit into your life." And as I sat in that chair, I said, "Lord, I can't go up there, but I give you my heart."
You see, whenever I thought about God, I thought about light and love and joy and peace and goodness and all of these happy things. And that was God to me. But when I picked up the Bible and I read the Bible, you know, I would read about tribulation and struggle and sin and war and death and the crucifixion. And there was no way in my mind that those kind of stories could resonate with God. So when he said that, I thought, oh, anything but the crucifixion. And the next thing he said was, and you're probably thinking, oh, the crucifixion, why that, anything but that. He said exactly what I had just thought. So that got my attention. I sat up a little bit straighter and I said, okay, God, you have something for me here today and I'm going to listen.
But one day, I sat down in my bedroom, and I don't know, it was just, I don't know. The Holy Spirit was there.
And I was so inspired and troubled and moved by that message. I just spent the whole rest of the day wrestling with God. I was saying, I was just praying. I was saying, this makes so much sense. I've seen in my life that there are decisions that separated me from the light and forced me into the darkness. That was one of the biggest object lessons in nature that I really resonated with at that time, was light and darkness.
Well, I had the Christian upbringing, and I knew from the Word of God that I wasn't pleasing God. And I knew that there had to be a solution, because God didn't create this world and leave me with no answers. And so now He had a captive audience. And I began to contemplate the fact that every single one of my friends were dead. All of my gay friends. And I began to think about my destiny. Like, okay, Wayne, what's going to happen to you? How does it turn out? How does this all end?
And when I stopped blaming and I started just using some logic, I just started thinking logically, how could I be born gay? And I started reviewing my life to see if I could connect the dots and figure out what happened. And that's when I reviewed my sexual molestation and repeated victimization. And I came to the realization, I was derailed in my childhood by the molestation, by many circumstances. And if I could be derailed, why couldn't I be re-railed?
Here I was, all by myself, sitting in front of God, and I simply heard Him say, "Can you hear me now? You have been blaming me your whole life for having caused this. And you know what, Wayne? Sin caused this. The enemy."
I was involved in a committed relationship that was for life. And we loved each other very much. But as I studied, I began to love Jesus more. And I realized I have to make a choice between these two men. This man that I'm involved with, and then a relationship of which God does not approve, and the man Jesus who gave His life for me.
That night in the parking lot, my sister says, "So what are you going to do about your boyfriend?" And I said, "Nothing, I'm gay. That's just who I am." And I said, I prayed that God would change me. I prayed that the Lord would take this away. I prayed that He would heal me, and He never did. I said, all I know is that I'm gay. I was born this way. And I said, and I know that Jesus loves me for who I am. And the next morning I was baptized. God was beginning a journey with me. I believe that He knew that He had to get me into that baptismal pool to make this commitment to follow Him and to walk with Him, and that He was going to be with me in all the confusion, and that He was going to walk with me.
It's as though the devil was not going to let me go. And if he could not entice me and lure me and deceive me, he would turn to violence. And that man that I was deeply in love with turned on me. And by the time we got through with that episode, I looked like I'd been in a car wreck. I was almost killed in that process. The Lord spared my life, but He let me go through that trauma. And I think He allowed me to go through that trauma to wake me up to see who I was really dealing with, and that I really was in bondage, and that I did need miraculous deliverance. And when I walked away from that relationship to accept Jesus Christ, I turned away and never went back.
I went home, and all of a sudden the reality hit me that, wait a minute, am I never going to know what it's like to love again? Am I never going to have somebody hold me in their arms and tell me that they love me? Am I never going to know what it's like to hold somebody and to lavish them with love too? I love Jesus, and I I wanted to serve him with my whole heart. Like, how could you ask me to do such a thing? How could you ask me to give up something that was so good?
Until one of my friends told me, I said, how could God, if he really wants me to give up being homosexual, how could he ask me to just give that up? Like, what? That's like who I am. How could he ask that of me? And she said, how could you give up anything for someone you don't know? And I said, I know who God is. And she said, no, you know about God. She said, you have no idea who he is. You have no idea what the character of God is. You don't know anything about him. You know that he created the world, which you believe, and you're coming to terms with the fact that he's not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. And she said, that's really all you know about him. And that just blew my mind. Like, that there was more to God than I had ever realized, that he may possibly have, like, a whole persona about him that I was just completely unaware. And it totally made sense. Like, I would never give up who I am for someone I don't know.
See, I thought all along that God wanted me to be straight, and like many a gay person, I was praying that prayer, God, please make me straight. And I know so many out there that have prayed this, like, well, God didn't make me straight, so, it's his fault, not mine. And, it was like a lightning bolt experience to me. God is not all about your sexuality. The enemy had convinced me that my identity was in sex, in my persuasions and my quests for where I matched up sexually, rather than in my identity in Jesus Christ. This is not about sexual persuasion, but this is about finding out who I am in accordance with God's plan.
And I remember going into my kitchen and mixing myself a double Midori margarita. And I went back to the living room and sat down with my margarita, and I lit up a cigarette, and then I opened the Word of God and I started reading. I think the Lord just met me where I was.
And as difficult as it was, and I went into this trembling, and certainly not faithful and perfect, but I began this commitment with Jesus, and it was messy. It was pretty messy. I would go to church and feel just too holy, and I would get out of church, and even before I go home, I would go to the gym and act out in the sauna or the steam room, and I would go home and I would just say, are you happy, God? This is who I am. This is your new little lamb for your flock. And I would, just say, you still want me? Because everybody else rejected me. Everybody else turned their back on me. You want to go too now? And each and every time, his answer was always the same. I still love you, Mike. Get back up. Walk with me. Let's go through this together.
It wasn't until I found the answer that I was looking for in the face of Jesus Christ that I really started experiencing contentment, that life with Christ and being close to God was enough.
I found myself on my knees at the end of my bed, and I said, God, I don't know how you could forgive me for doing so many things that brought shame to you, that hurt you, because this isn't what you wanted for me. I've wasted all these years in my life. I've dedicated my life to self-pleasure, whether it was through drugs or alcohol or sex or doing all kinds of things to gratify me, certainly not to please God. And I had read enough at that point where I knew that Jesus' whole purpose of going to the cross was to pay for what I had done to him.
He said, "You're my son. And I don't condemn you as a sinner. I died for your sins, but I ask for you to give yourself over to me because there's a better way than the way that you've experienced. I shed my blood for you so that you can claim this victory. It's freely yours. All you have to do is give your heart to me."
I'd like to say that I got baptized and I came up out of that water ready to date and marry women, but that was not my reaction. And I think anyone realizes that when they get baptized, about 15 minutes later, you realize that God doesn't take away your history or your memory.
The question comes to mind, do you go under the water gay and come up straight? That disappointed a lot of people. Thankfully, I think God had prepped me for that. He wanted me to give the sex over to him, but that wasn't going to be the issue that we were going to be working with. We were going to be dealing with developing the intimacy with him and him being in charge of all aspects of my life. So I certainly wasn't tempted just by sexual issues. And by attaining a girlfriend or a wife was certainly not going to put an affirmation that, oh, now I'm redeemed, because there's certainly a lot of people probably even viewing this today that are saying marriage isn't the antidote for sin.
As I tell this part of my story, I've been asked many times, did the Lord just take homosexuality away from you? And I say, well, no, he didn't. And I've talked to many friends and people that say, well, I prayed for years that the Lord would just take this away. And he doesn't. So he must just want me to be this way. He must have made me this way.
Am I still tempted? Are you kidding me? My response to people today that think I shouldn't be because I gave my life to Christ is, well, are you? You see, why would it be fair for Jesus to take my temptations away and not take yours away?
I gave up on God because he did not remove my tendencies, my inclinations, and my temptations. But as I studied his word, I never could find any promises that he does remove temptation. That's not his role. Jesus came to save his people from their sins. And he promises that his grace is sufficient.
I want anyone to know that has lived in the gay culture for a very long time, that if you're looking to go back to Christ and seek his will instead of what comes naturally to you, I'll tell you who's going to try to get in the way, and that's the devil. He doesn't give up easily.
I was desperate to be secure in my sin. I did whatever I could. I was willing. Tell me lies. Lie to me. Tell me that I could still keep my boyfriend and keep my Savior. And you know something? I was sincerely seeking Jesus because I was experiencing him. And if I chose to keep my identity, I could. But I could not deny the fact that his word says that it's a sin, that it separates me, that it's damaging, that it doesn't give me ultimate fulfillment.
When we go back to the Word of God, the question that needs to be asked is this a relationship that pleases God? Because if it's only one person that's needed to lay the deception and you believe it, he's got you.
God gave us the Bible to show us where the safety lies. He gave us his commandments as instruction for us to be safe, to stay away from the things that will only wound us and that will bring death into our life.
There are consequences for choices that I've made in my life. Jesus said, yes, you're going to have temptations in life, but I don't force you to act on these temptations. And Wayne, you acted on them for many years of your life. So I have the stain of sin on me. I have scars on me.
Sin is bondage. So anything that God describes in his word as bondage, he doesn't want me to partake in it so that I can really have freedom, true freedom and liberty.
Christ came to bridge that gap for us, to cover that chasm that's been opened up as a result of sin. Christ bridges that gap and allows us to come back to God and experience eternal life through him with God.
If a visitor comes to our church, I want him to find it a safe place to hear the words of Jesus in their purity. We never know when someone might come into our church that really desperately needs help spiritually, and our churches need to be safe places for them to find healing for their soul, to find victory in Jesus Christ.
Because it's time for us to talk about this. It's time for us to offer help to the church members to be able to relate. And it's time to offer help to the people who feel that they need change in their life and that they want to overcome this. And that's why I think it's important for me to share this kind of ministry.
It was amazing to me. I still marvel at how the Lord worked in my life. Within 1 year after my leaving the gay life, I was surprised at how the Lord led me into meeting a lady that I had known since childhood. The Lord brought us together. We dated, we became engaged, we married. I prayed earnestly that the Lord would give me a second chance with family, because I had squandered the beautiful gift of family that He had given me in my youth. And the Lord has since blessed us with 2 beautiful children.
Even though I've also had attractions to men, that doesn't mean that it's just immediately easy for me and I can just go and find a husband and move forward in life. I've chosen to not allow myself to be focused on sexuality anymore, not allow myself to be focused on marriage anymore, but to just place my life completely in the hands of God. I've purposed in my heart that sexuality and marriage will not be a focus in my life anymore.
I'm still very convinced that the Bible is truth. And if I were to go back fully to religion, it would only be to what the Bible said. Like, I'm not interested in open interpretation here. Like, if it says it and I'm gonna be religious, I'm gonna do it. It's just coming to a point where I'm ready to say, I want my life to line up with the Bible. It is not lining up, so I'm gonna give these things up. Like, I'm just not there yet.
What, as a gay person, does it mean to come back and give your life to Jesus if that means being lonely for the rest of your life? I know this is what a lot of gay people have contemplated, and what a lot of heterosexual people have even gone as far to say, you know, that's just not fair. It's been something that I have grappled with in my experience of walking back with Jesus Christ today. But the promise from Jesus is that He will never leave us or never forsake us. And that even in our darkest hours, and when our feelings tell us that we're alone, it's still a lie from the enemy, because the truth is that Jesus does say that He's still there.
My sexual preference was only always same sex. I never experienced anything else, and my orientation now is not in my sexual desires, and I may struggle with attractions to the same sex for the rest of my life. One of the things that I know is that whenever I feel emasculated, whenever I feel like I don't measure up as a man, then what happens is same-sex attraction starts to come back. And so what I do is I can go to my Father and I can get down on my knees and I say, Lord, will you remind me again that I'm your man? Will you remind me again that you made me male for a reason? And He's quick to respond. And yes, Mike, you're my man.
I share my testimony today. There's many people that come and identify with the fact that, hey, I'm not gay, but you were certainly talking to me, because you were talking about surrender, about abiding in Jesus Christ, about submitting yourself to Jesus and letting Him have control. And so today, as I identify in a new life with Jesus Christ, I have to say that my identity is that I am indeed a new creature, which is what 2 Corinthians 5:17 tells me.
2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. It's a new creation. Christ is the creator. If we are in Christ, we are a new creature, a new creation. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. When I use that argument all those years that I was born this way, Jesus has a comeback to that. He simply says, well, then be born again. Stop blaming your heritage. Even if you are born that way, Jesus came to show us that we can be born again and we can start over.
The 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11. A lot of times we've heard 9 and 10. It tells us, who will be received into heaven and who won't be. And it's clear that he says that homosexuals will not enter into heaven. But verse 11 says, such were some of you. That tells me there has to be healing. There has to be an understanding. There has to be a change. Ooh, what is the change? Is it from gay to straight? No. It's about allowing Jesus to come into your life and to develop that intimacy with him, getting to know him and seeking to do his will.
If he is who I've been reading that he is, it all makes sense. Like, he is all-knowing and all-loving and willing to take you back, and it's nice to have somebody who, if I don't want him there, he's not going to push, but if I do, he's completely and totally willing to just pick me up, dust me off, and walk with me.
What are you willing to give up for Jesus Christ? What are you willing to give up to please him? What are you willing to do that will bring glory and honor to his name? And if it's too much for you, if you want to cling to something that it appears that doesn't bring him honor and glory, he won't take it out of your hands. He won't force it away from you. He'll invite you. But the decision, that's the one thing we did arrive with. Even though we arrived with a fallen nature and the stain of sin on us, he has given us the power of choice. I can either choose for him or I can choose for self.
How like God to show me that when I really just started opening up myself and making myself the most vulnerable I've ever been in my entire life, that what I get instead is not rejection, but acceptance, belonging, love, peace, safety. Because you know what? Now that I've told you my whole ugly story, somebody could walk up to me and say, Mike, you're nothing but a faggot. And I go, well, without Jesus Christ, you're right. That's probably all I would be. But I'm something so much more, not because of what I've done. I don't deserve what God has given to me. I certainly couldn't earn it. There was no way that I could ever change my attractions, but I praise him each and every day that he's given me something above and beyond anything that I ever felt that I deserved or that I could ever attain to, all because I accepted the gift of his son Jesus and the sacrifice that was made for me. For the first time in my life, I truly am who I am.
The long battle is now behind. No more need to be brave. For though we walked through darkest night, now we walk into endless day. Can you hear the voice of him singing as we go? Can you feel the love of him calling his daughters and sons? Look at every glowing face, none tell of troubles or fears. For though we walk through thorny ways, now we walk through fields of flowers. Can you hear the voice of him singing as we go? Can you feel the love of him calling his daughters and sons? you, the Father of life, is capable